It came off the other side of the wheels because it's a package from China with infinite power. Yeah. Yoo! Welcome back to the channel. It's awesome that you're tuning in because in this video it's not going to be ASMR, but we're going to be doing a little bit of a chit chat about the K56 handheld. So this is actually from the famous company Kinhank that made all kinds of different devices when it comes to, let's say, Android boxes and whatsoever. So this thing comes with the T620 chip in the inside, and yeah, we're having 6 GB of RAM, 128 GB of storage, and the GPU is going to be the Mali TMG57. However, we're having multiple flavors that we can actually choose from, but is this going to be any good? That is what we're going to be checking out today. So when it comes to these devices, they are based on Android, and part of me kind of hates it with a simple reason, because you need to set it up. However, Kinhank with his K56 handheld, we're going to be having like a semi plug and play solution. So like the set over here, sometimes it's smart to actually charge it before you're going to be using it, and that's actually what I did. So I choose this particular color, the purple with the orange. Man, I love the color. I love just this purple overall design. But the first thing I do notice when actually holding this device is that it has like a very nice light weight to it. Not like the cheap feel weight, but just a very nice overall, let's say, feel. But let's get to it a little bit on it later. So in here we're having the... Do we have paper? Yep, we do have like the manual over here. Makes an explanation how everything works. There's some great explanation. So the USB-C cable for charging, some cleaning wipes for if you want to attach yourself like the screen protector, and ooh, they're even giving you this very nice USB 2.0, and you know, they're giving you this micro SD thingy. And it's kind of cool, but you know, 2.0, oh man, that's going to be taking forever if you're going to be charging, or actually like transferring all kinds of different big data to your SD card. So I would recommend getting a 3.0 at least. But let's take a close look at the device itself. So one of the things I really love about it is the form factor. I have seen it before. Think about it more like the Odin devices. And the Odin devices had a similar, and also some Kitty did some, let's say, similar, let's say, very ergonomic devices. And I must say that they're a little bit big, so you would not put this like fairly easy in your pocket. However, this is going to be an interesting overall configuration. So having the volume control on and off switch. So when it comes to the top buttons, we don't have analog triggers. Everything is micro switched with a very nice resistance. Over here by the A, B, X, Y button, and the feel itself is okay. You know, the travel and the overall touch itself. So too, having just basic analog buttons, and I must say the analog, I do like them, because when you're going to be doing up close, you can see that this thing has some very nice details at the side, so it makes it very comfortable, and the overall travel is quite good. However, when it comes to, let's say, all the other buttons like the D-pad, and the D-pad, this is something I'm going to be liking a lot, with the simple reason because the D-pad is micro-switched. So the micro-switch D-pad, okay, so first of all, like they have this very nice curve, and you can see that if you're going to be touching it, it does have like a nice wiggle to it. So it's not like micro-switch stuff that we have seen before. We do have a little bit of travel, but underneath, we're going to be having, let's say, absolutely amazing overall feel. But how does it actually perform into games? But when it comes to the overall configuration, this is everything you're going to be needing. But I think if you're going to be comparing this with an Odin, and of course specification wise, this is going to be something different when it comes to, let's say, the quality, but just the power itself. Oh, I mean the power itself. So over here, micro switch, select and start. Over here at the right and at the left, having the home and the back button. So this thing is an Android device, meaning that we can do all kinds of cool stuff. If you're going to be connecting this with the Wi-Fi, you can actually do all kinds of interesting things. So let's check out the software itself. If you don't want to do any tinkering, I think out of the box this can be an interesting concept. So in here we're having all of the programs you're normally having on your smartphone, including the Play Store. If you're going to be adding yourself your own account, you can even do some cool things like installing Studio Rage 4, and all kinds of cool games can be played on there. So they did an amazing job when it comes to everything, when it comes to the overall organization, simulation, Google Apps, tools, everything you're going to be needing. Even Moonlight streaming and Steam Link can be implemented in here. So if you're going to be choosing the Pegasus is more like a complete front end. And here we can actually play every single emulator. So, but let's give this thing some loading time, because man, this takes freaking forever with my version. And let's remove the screen protector. Yeah. Okay, so it took forever to actually load up. And the first thing I did notice, and I did ask them, like, hey, why isn't he showing any pictures? But you know what's kind of weird? When at loading times, it is something that I actually did myself because I was messing into the settings. There's not actually much I can do so far I have seen. So when it comes to only show existing games, it has been turned on and I just shut it off. And I was messing around with the other, let's say, backend, the kind of stuff like enable, disabling, disable, just as data sources. I was messing with that, and when I enabled one of those, it took me even like freaking 5 minutes to load up. But the overall configuration out of the box, where this thing doesn't even show the pictures, and I think there's something else going on, so it's going to be something I'm going to be actually messing around. But you can actually play all kinds of different platforms, and I can tell you that when it comes to the power of this, I would not expect of like supreme overall performance of GameCube and that kind of systems, but there's some of them will be playable. So that's going to be interesting. It's the same kind of software they are using on their, like say, X5 Pro game systems, but it's more like the basic plug-and-play solution. So you can see we're going to be booting up the game, and it will automatically boot up very quickly. And that part all seems to be working just fine. So that is not going to be a problem whatsoever. So emulation performance and the way how everything has been set up, and this is the thing I wanted to actually showcase, that seems to be working fine. Also when it comes to the D-pad, I must say that I am a big fan when it comes to that. So in overall, I must say that this is going to be absolutely an overall fun handheld to just play some games with. But again, it goes to a personal thing. You can press select and start, go back. So that part of the software seems to be working, so I should check out why I don't have any pictures. So going back to the home, you can just press it over here. We can also do the other front end. And I must say that this was something I did needed to actually set up the first time. So that was kind of surprising that I needed to do that. And what I'm getting is the same result. So I think I need to mess around with the overall software to see what is going on. You can see I don't see the selection over there. But there is something of the setup that I did wrong, or there is something going on in general with the SD card. That also brings me to the SD card, because that is a really interesting but also problematic situation. So once again, they're using the extreme speed SD cards. They look similar to SanDisk when it comes to the, let's say, color theme, but I've been having some really bad experiences with them. So I don't understand why they're using this, because this is one of those simple things that completely destroys the overall, let's say, performance, but also what maybe comes to the picture. But again, the overall, let's say, extreme speed car thingies, they should just avoid it and just get a real brand. And that is one of my biggest, let's say, really annoying thing that happens with a lot of devices. Cheap SD cards, they get corrupted. That will happen eventually. But let's get in some gaming, some emulation testing, and showcase what this thing is actually capable of. So when it comes to some basic gaming, if you just want to play some PC Engine, NES, Super NES, Genesis, whatever, this can be played without any problem whatsoever. And I think that's kind of cool. These things are just capable of running all kinds of games all the way up to PlayStation 1 without any problem. I wouldn't expect any upscaling with some PlayStation 1. We still have some limitations, but this is just a fun extra bonus. What they did actually great with the software is that we do having bezels, so we're going to be having the perfect overall resolution for the game. So navigation, I really love it when it comes to this particular, let's say, device. I'm a big fan of the D-pad, of the micro switch, but I think it's the combination of having, oh, that was weird. That's the combination of having actually, let's say, the micro switch D-pad, but also having a little bit of wiggle to it. It's the right perfect combination. Let's get back to some different games. But another thing I also noticed is that the overall audio quality is quite good. So with PlayStation Portable, when pressing the back button over here, we can actually get into the emulator. So with the emulator, we can just mess around with it if you have some problems. So for example, this kind of almost like find it weird that they implemented frame skipping, but they did actually render the resolution to 2 times. I understand that it's going to be looking way better than the pixelated craziness. No, I don't want to have that. But let's do a little bit of a view with the show frames. Okay, that's great. And let's get into the game. And let's see if this is going to be an overall playable situation. And because when it comes to frame skipping, I'm personally not a big fan of actually doing that.
Ridge Racer, are you ready?
The course is in excellent
So one of the things always fun to actually check out is like how will this perform when it comes to, let's say, PlayStation Portable. I think we're going to be needing way more power actually to just get some perfect overall, let's say, gameplay. But it's interesting that the analog stick, do you have the idea that I do have a little bit of a dead zone, or this is just a particular game? But you can see the struggles. It does have like a little bit of dip over there. But this is absolutely a cool playable situation. But that makes me wonder, like, what happens if you're going to be putting this on one-time resolution and continue? It's going to be looking way uglier. But it's going to be having an overall way better performance, and this way we can just tweak. So let's say frame skipping off, we'll go back, continue. Let's see how this is going to be performing. Oh, crap. So performance-wise, we can mess around with it every single game. But of course, if you're going to be having an, let's save it over here. It's going to be fun actually to revisit that game. But of course, we can also go into, let's say, the simple games, and those will have like overall way better performance. Love the soundtracks. So let's move on to the Sega Dreamcast, because also this is a system that has the option to actually be played on this quite nice. And I think this is going to be a very fun overall experience. And also a great test to check out the D-pad itself. I think for Schmups this is going to be absolutely awesome. Still, I'm not sure about the analog stick. The overall responsiveness is kind of weird. Well, performance-wise, this game runs pretty good. So that's awesome. But with the back button we cannot do anything. The only thing we can do is just go back to the main menu. So not every emulator will actually have the option to just start tweaking. Another system you don't see very often is the Atari Jaguar, but you know, this is going to be quite difficult to actually emulate on devices like this K56. However, I must say this, let's do a little bit of a deep dive into some overall emulation to see how this will perform. Because it's actually just a two-dimensional game. But so far, with getting into the game, it seems to be working just fine. Where I did notice a lot of stuttering in the beginning. So Game Boy Advance is going to be one of those many devices that runs perfectly on this. However, we do implement the bezel for the right resolution, but I think if you're going to be putting this without bezel, I'm going to be playing this full screen where it's maybe not the perfect, let's say, overall resolution emulation situation. I think it's going to be absolutely enjoyable. They made actually some pretty cool beat 'em up games on the Game Boy Advance. Where this device can be really interesting for playing some N64. Oh man, we have seen so many devices that struggle with N64. But let's get into it and just see what's going on. Thanks to the analog stick, we do have every single button and joystick we're going to be needing for playing all of these games. And the overall emulation performance is pretty smooth, as you can see over here with the intro, because with most devices that struggles, real stutter like crazy over here. But let's see what's going on. Time to get moving. Oh yeah, time to get moving. Of course, depends on what kind of game you want to play, and we can actually do a dedicated video about like N64 to see how those all will play. But Blast Corps is one of my favorite games to actually play and to try out, because it does surprisingly be very difficult to emulate. So what I have seen with many other devices. But so far so good. Don't you love it how you can just basically destroy buildings, but you cannot remove a freaking tree. Don't you love those retro games? If you want to play some DS in here, we can actually do that. However, so you need to mess around with, say, swapping menus and everything else. It's kind of cool that here we can swap different kind of setups. And in here we can just also change it out fairly easy. And this way we can switch between screens. It depends on when you want to play and how you want to play it. I think with a screen like this, it makes it okay, you know, it makes it actually enjoyable. For the simple reason we can just switch between, let's say, the screens, and in this way we can just have some fun. Where this is still not the most perfect overall way to play when it comes to DS. With Sega Saturn on another system that can be challenging to actually emulate on the device like this, it seems to be running quite nice. And I think this is one of those devices where we do have the option to actually play a lot of Sega Saturn games. So for N64 emulation, but also Sega Saturn, we can do some really cool things in here. But so far, nothing crazy going on. We don't have the option to actually very easily go into the menu of the emulator to mess around with that. The only thing we can do is just go back this way. To Pegasus! Faster than speed with the Atomiswave, and I must say this is a pretty cool looking game. If you're going to be looking at the graphical part of the cars, man, this looks even nicer than, let's say, in the Need for Speed Underground 2.
Bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. Let's see what's going on. Let's see if this thing actually boots up and can we actually play this. It did have some problems in the previous, let's say, emulator test. Oh yeah, again some Need for Speed vibes over here.
Go!
Okay, there we go. Okay, that game seems to be working fine. Man, this game looks really cool. We had so many problems with Atomiswave. Now we can actually play these games without a lot of problems. So that's kind of cool. Ooh, getting some moss too. Whoa! Oh. Ha! Old school arcade racer, man. But also, when it comes to arcade, we can play a lot more than before. That is one thing to be sure. Okay, the first thing that I already noticed, like we don't have weird things going on when it comes. Okay, let's see the lighting. Ugh. So the first thing I do is like normally we're having all kinds of weird things going on when it comes to emulation performance, but you know, the overall improvement of the emulation of the Sega Dreamcast is kind of cool. So another thing you can also check out, if you're going to be separately downloaded a Dream emulator, we can just mess around with upscaling and maybe get a little bit overall better performance, but particularly when it comes to upscaling. But out of the box, pre-installed, this looks quite nice. It doesn't work with the Dream emulator, still running through RetroArch. Native resolution, this works quite well. I'm always struggling with the freaking controls. How to get in the thing, how to get out, how to freaking shoot. Oh! So the K56 is maybe not the most powerful one out there, but I think this thing has a lot of potential. Personally, I find it a very pleasant one to actually play, simply because of the nice D-pad and the overall analog stick configuration. It has enough power to run, let's say, a lot of emulator, but of course still with some emulation, let's say performance issue when it comes to, let's say, newer stuff, PlayStation 2, GameCube. I wouldn't really expect anything from there. It was not even, let's say, pre-installed on the emulator section. So when it comes to that, you should like add yourself to your own emulator and just actually set it all up there. So the microSD card, that is something they should absolutely improve, but I think it has been like a couple of years ago when I first noticed those things and I was really complaining about those things then, and they're still doing the same shenanigans. Thank you all for watching, and it will be great to see you in the next video.